Hello? Mama?
Dakota, you doing your deliveries a little early this morning, aren't you?
Yes, ma'am. I hope that's all right. I'm trying to get off of work a little early today.
Oh? Well, how about that? Getting off early have anything to do with that little Jones girl?
How'd you know that?
I'm old boy, not blind.
Yes, ma'am. I just haven't told anyone yet that we are going on a date.
Oh, I've seen you two glancing at each other. Tell you what, if your next few dates go well, you tell me which day you want to do it, and I'll pack you to a picnic, and you can take her out near the lake. Would you like that?
Yes, ma'am. I really would.
Well, good. Like I said, just let me know when. Just promise me something. I don't want you two hanging out down near the lake at night. Not alone with just the two of you. I know that is where all the young couples like to go, and I just think maybe keeping the romance around the lake in the daytime is safest.
Okay, Mama.
Good. That lake can be dangerous for couples at night.
You can?
Oh, I'm just an old woman being worried, but humor me if you don't mind.
Sure thing, Mama.
Now what do you have for me?
Just this one package today. Sign for it right here.
I wasn't expecting a package today, so this is a surprise.
Alrighty. I'll see you later now, Mama.
Okay, hon. You have fun tonight, and don't get up to any trouble.
No, ma'am, I won't. Promise.
Oh, to be 20 again. Now, what could be in this box?
Good evening, Gloaming Falls. I know everyone is excited and a little tired after a week of getting ready for the upcoming Greek days. This weekend has always been great fun, and not every town can boast that they are the chosen place of over 3,000 college students from all over the state to have a really great party. The tradition of Greek days started so far back, no one really knows the history, but for 3 days in February, a large number of fraternities and sororities descend upon this town to experience a few nights out in the rough. Or as rough as they might want to get these days by spending a few winter nights camping by the lake. I am expected to remind everyone that usual precautions are being taken and there will be more visible police presence over the weekend. Although we all look forward to this weekend, we still want everyone to stay safe. Sheriff Brody wants to remind everyone there is a fine and jail time to anyone caught selling alcohol to an underage individual. Having said that, I know we all just want a very safe and fun weekend. Up next, I have some very fitting music from Secret Societies, the Blonde Twins, and Hey College Kids.
Who is it? Oh, it's you. Well, good. Close and lock the door and come on back. Let's go sit next to the fire. I got something for you. So I assume your interview went well today. See, I told you. I had a good feeling. So you are now a deputy on the Gloaming Falls Police Force. When do you start? That soon? Well, I guess you probably can skip some of the training and get straight to the job, having been a cop in New York City. Most of it would probably just be formality for you anyways. Oh, yes, you are right. They would need you for this weekend. Oh, this is always a fun weekend. I know they get up to some trouble, but Only the old hens ever complain, and believe me, they aren't complaining about the money being spent in town. Sometimes, after the kids have all been in and out of the shop and we all get to talking, I get invited to come to the lake and hang out. Isn't that what they say? Hang out. I take them up on it, too. They behave a little better when they see an old woman puttering around anyways. Oh, no real trouble. I think all the police does is watch over them and make sure none of them drink too much or drive dangerous. Once they are settled down by the lake on Friday nights, the kids' craziness tend to stay there until they drag their behinds out again on Monday. Some of them will be regretting being alive until that little hangover clears. They usually just pop into town for food and we all sell souvenirs. This weekend will be what keeps some of these businesses afloat until it warms up come March and the real tourist season starts up.
For the next hour, I have a bunch of oldies lined up. I guess I'm reliving my college days a little, and I hope you guys don't mind going down memory lane with me. I wasn't a sorority girl, so this Greek life stuff is kind of, well, Greek to me. I know, I cracked myself up. I decided to do a little reading, though, and learned that since the 1900s, 63% of members of the U.S. Cabinet, the current chief executive officers of 5 of the 10 largest Fortune 500 companies, and 85% of all justices of the U.S. Supreme Court have been members of fraternities or sororities. There have been U.S. presidents, famous actors, athletes, and artists who all took part in Greek letter societies. There have even been infamous people, like the suspected serial killer John Norman Collins, who was part of the Theta Chi fraternity. This reading, of course, led me down the rabbit hole of secret societies, skull and bones, and the private ritualistic ceremonies that go on behind closed doors for members who participate in college Greekdom. You have to wonder what impact Greek life really has on its young participants. The idea is that you are leaving home for college and you find this group of people who become a new family. A family that in its inner workings has secret rituals and loyalties identified by its own governing bodies. It makes you wonder just how many of the more notorious members of our world started out in a college secret society. All of this, of course, are the thoughts of someone who was never part of it all. I guess if we were to ask one of them what impact Greek life has on college students, well, if the Greek Life Weekend has shown us anything over the years, it's that the main impact is that they have learned how to throw one hell of a party. Here's the song To the Good Life by Earth Am I.
Okay, child. Look there on that table. See that box? Pick it up and hold it. When you hold it, do you notice anything about it? I mean, do you sense anything when you focus on it? Okay. Well, sit down and hold it in your lap while I explain. From time to time, people who have heard of me and my shop will send me things. Sometimes the things I get are just simple items someone wants sold, knowing I can be a pretty good hustler. Sometimes they are things that are sentimental, and even though they might need to sell it, they know I will take care of it until it finds a good home. And then There are some things that get sent to me because they are just too strange, and people aren't sure what else to do with them. I feel like this box is going to have one of those items. Something benign or dangerous we won't know until we open it up, but from the tingling in my fingers when I hold it, I know this box has strangeness attached to it. So now, think about opening that box and tell me what you feel. That's right. Good. So you can sense it too. Whatever you got there in that box isn't something we can just ignore. So, why don't we open it up? What's that there? A letter? Is it addressed to me? Okay, so what else is in the box? Oh, that is a strange looking little statue. Does it have horns? It looks like a little devil. What kind of rock is that made out of, you think? Why is he naked? It's a little too dirty for me. I don't like to look at it. Oh, you're right, he is playing a little flute. Well, I guess for now, put it back in the box and let me read this letter. Okay, the letter says, "To whomever reads this letter, please put it and the contents of this box in the hands of the proprietor for the shop at 1428 Blue Devil Avenue, Gloman Falls. I am told everyone just calls her Mama. It is very important she receives this package because I am told only she will know what to do with what is inside. Please just give this letter and box to Mama. Mama, if you are reading this, then I hope that what I was told is correct and you do in fact know what to do. My name is Melinda, and that is all I am really prepared to share. I'm a retired teacher and once had a wonderful family, and it is because of them I'm writing to you. My life has been nothing but misery for the past months, and my hope is that sending this thing away from me to someone who knows what to do will fix my problems. Let me start all of this from the beginning. Everything started, as best as I can tell, almost 6 months ago when we all went camping. My husband and I, my daughter, her husband, and her 2 children, my son, his wife, and their child, who is my youngest grandson, all went camping near Brown Mountain, North Carolina. There is a town the 8 of us like to visit because it is close to some family we see and has everything the kids like, one of the main things being hiking. About the 3rd day into the trip, my grandchildren, my son and son-in-law, went hiking at Brown Mountain. They were gone most of the day. When they returned, both adults acted like the hike had been stressful. The children, though, were excited about something they had found in a cave at Brown Mountain. What the kids showed us is the small statue that is included in this box. I thought it was slightly obscene and couldn't believe my son and son-in-law were letting the kids keep it. But with the way both grown men were acting, I didn't press the issue. After the kids were in bed, they told us what happened that day and why the men acted so scared and jumpy. That day, the men were happy to take all 3 kids, my 2 grandsons and granddaughter, hiking and let them just run and play. The kids were pretty experienced with hiking with them, and the rule was always just to not get out of sight, don't climb any higher than a few feet off the ground, and never get too close to the edge of any rocks. That day, they had all stopped at the mouth of a cave that was essentially a dead end, with no way out except the cave mouth. They stopped to eat lunch, and the men sat right outside and could see all the way to the back of the cave where the kids were exploring. They said that after they ate, the kids were yelling and just being themselves, and at one point the kids started chasing each other. My granddaughter, the oldest, was behind, and my youngest grandchild, my son's son, was in front. My son was just about to tell them not to run inside around all the rocks when my youngest grandson tripped. The child fell, and instead of falling into the rock wall, which was what they both were bracing for, the child fell through the wall. Let me make sure I am explaining that clearly. My grandson tripped and fell through a rock wall while his dad and uncle were watching. The men said they froze in shock, and both children running behind him froze, just staring at the wall where he went through. Finally, my granddaughter yelled for her dad, and that snapped them into action. They both ran to the back of the cave, and everyone started yelling for my grandson. They all started looking at the wall where he fell, trying to figure out what happened and where he went. They said it was just a solid rock wall with no holes, caverns, gaps in the rocks, and somehow my grandson just fell through it. As time went on, the other children became upset and started to cry. The men sent them to sit at the mouth of the cave while the men kept searching. The men said that the logical thing to them was that there was a hole or a crack, and they just had to find it. They said they didn't know how long they had been looking over the same part of the cave, but realized they needed help. My son, who was the child who fell father, said he should continue looking while my son-in-law took his children and went for help. That was the moment the other two children started running from one rock to another, yelling my grandson's name. They were saying they could hear my grandson call for his dad. The kids were putting their ears up to the rocks and listening. The men ran to the front of the cave, and they said they could hear the child yelling and crying. They said that they could hear his voice. It sounded like it was coming from all directions, but also from the rocks. They ended up putting their heads to the rocks as well, trying to hear him and calling his name. All of a sudden, they said they could hear my grandson's voice, clear as a bell, right behind them. They all turned, and my grandson was standing at the back of the cave right in front of where he fell, and he was crying. They all ran to him, and he was just standing there crying, holding that little statue. The men were so rattled, they just grabbed all three children and ran. Once everyone was in the car, they started asking my grandson what happened, and all he would say is he fell and everything went black. He stood up and started to feel along the walls, trying to get back where he was before. He said he could hear everyone calling for him, but they sounded like they were on the other side of a wall. Then he said he heard a voice calling his name that sounded really close. The voice was calling his name and told him that he was a friend, but that he was hiding. If he found him, then my grandson could go home. My grandson cried and called for his dad, but started feeling around for the person saying they were hiding. He said he felt something and picked it up. As soon as he picked this thing up, there was light, and he was standing back in the cave with everyone and was holding that little stone statue of a half-goat man playing a flute. They did try to take it from him a few times, but he would scream and fight, and they were all so scared they just left it alone. None of us knew what to make of that story, and none of us knew how to respond. The kids were acting normal by the time they came back to us, and they were just proud of this thing they had found in the cave. They acted like they had found a treasure. My husband offered to take my son and son-in-law back to the cave and try to figure out what happened, and maybe try to prevent it from happening to someone else, since this was near a trail where many people hiked. My husband was sure my grandson had slipped into a hole or between some rocks, but my son and son-in-law refused to even consider the idea of going back. 2 days later, we were back on the road home, but before we left, my son and son-in-law were jumpy the rest of the trip. I know now we should have all taken more interest in what happened in that cave. If we had known what we were bringing back with us, we would have gotten rid of all of this evil. The next trouble didn't start until about a week later. My daughter and son-in-law and their 2 children live with us while their house is being built. My son and his wife and their child, who was my youngest grandson, live near us. We also get along with both of my children's in-laws' families, and we all tend to be at each other's houses and have a very large family dinner just about once a week. We have been blessed, and we have all gotten along, and we have had a wonderful, happy home. Suddenly, My youngest grandchild, the one that went missing in the cave, started not to get along with the other kids in the family. It was odd because he was the most gentle of them all. He also started bringing that statue with him everywhere. Thankfully, I had him convinced to never take it out of his pocket if he didn't want it taken away. His parents never seemed to notice it or didn't seem bothered. He carried a little naked statue around with him everywhere, but it was like they weren't aware until you actually pointed to it and made them see it. Sometime later, my youngest grandson had gotten in trouble at school. He was getting into fights, and the one that got him suspended for a while was when he shoved two tables together and smashed another child's hand between them. When his teacher reacted to his behavior, he started to swipe at her with a sharpened pencil like it was a knife. He had to leave school until he saw a doctor. This behavior scared everyone, so a doctor's appointment was made, and he stayed with me during the day while his parents worked. During this time, my grandson had started talking to the statue and even gave it a name. I don't know why, but he called it Tina. Since he wasn't allowed back at school until after several doctors and counseling appointments, and he was staying with me, I tried to separate him from that little thing he was now calling Tina. Since it was small enough to fit in his pocket, I thought it would be easy enough to just lose the damn thing. I thought I had even done it twice. Once, when he was asleep, I grabbed it and stuck it in my purse to throw away later. The second was when he had actually forgotten about it and gone outside to play. I put it straight into the bottom of my bathroom trash bin. Both times, he walks right into the room holding that little statue. I asked him where he found it, and he said in his pocket. I asked if he had been in my purse or my trash, and he insisted he just found it back in his pocket. That scared me so bad I started begging his parents to take it away, but they didn't. After that, things with our family just went from bad to worse. The doctor found scratches and bruises on my grandson, and his parents had to be investigated, and he came to stay with me. My son and his wife were blaming each other for my grandson's behavior and the marks on his body. They separated, and then that only put fuel to the fire for DSS. My husband had a stroke and ended up in the hospital for a month before passing away. My daughter's house was found to have black mold in a freshly built section, and it had to be torn down and rebuilt. This cost them a ton more money and caused stress on them, and they began to have problems. Finances of having to stay longer with me, the stress of my husband's death, and my grandson's erratic behavior just made for more strain, and they soon separated as well. My son's in-laws started trying to threaten for custody of my youngest grandson, and my daughter-in-laws stayed away from all of us. They would babysit their own grandchildren from time to time, but that was all the interaction we had with them. We went from being a large, happy, close-knit family one minute to a family in shambles the next. The part I feel the most guilty about is that when my son's in-laws wanted my youngest grandchild, I almost tried to convince him to give my grandson up. I will never forgive myself for that weakness, but I have to wonder if it wasn't the right thing to do. It was when it was just me, my daughter, and all three grandchildren in the house alone that I thought I would start to go insane. We live in a small town in Kentucky. Everyone knows everyone, and all the stories about our family was making the rounds. It was when the last bit of craziness started that the people of my town started to really turn against us. Over a month ago, my grandson's behavior stopped being violent, vulgar, or erratic. Slowly, he became my grandson again, and to my relief, we had a peaceful week in the house. My grandson soon put that ugly little statue on his dresser and left it alone. He stopped talking about Tina altogether. Then, one night, my granddaughter began screaming. She started saying that something had been tapping on her window, and when she looked out, she saw something small, with large ears and huge eyes staring through the window. The other two children had seen nothing, and my daughter and I got her calmed down and back to sleep. At about 4 a.m., though, we were awoken by what sounded like large squirrels or raccoons running around on the roof. Then we could hear things in the yard getting moved around. We turned on the outside lights and couldn't really see anything. The next few nights, it kept happening, only whoever or whatever was messing with us started to get braver. We would hear noises on the roof, things running on the porch, decorations and lawn furniture outside being moved around. Wood in the wood pile was tossed around the yard. Our cards were scratched. We could hear windows being hit and sound of some kind of animals we couldn't recognize making loud calls in the woods. If we turned the lights on, nothing clear could be seen, but it looked like there were these small animals, kind of like monkeys, running on two legs and running in the shadows where you could barely see. We started staying awake almost all night, and my daughter and I even shot guns into the woods at them several times, and it might stop them from coming back a few nights, but then they would come right back. With everything going on, we didn't want to call the police, but finally caved in and called them. They came out and didn't find anything, but that was when one of the deputies was nice enough to come back after hours and help fix broken yard lights and make sure all the doors were locking properly and all the windows shut securely. We had already done that, but it was nice of him anyways. And he also spent time with my youngest grandson because he had heard the stories about the child and all he had put us through. I remembered him being the deputy that responded when my grandson had jumped on the back of a waitress in a diner one night. He was yelling that she would be eaten by fire. That was when we had pretty much stopped taking my grandson anywhere at all in public, except to the doctor. Before that deputy left that night, he came into our house and he asked me about the little devil statue that my grandson called Tina. He had seen it on my grandson's dresser and thought it was odd, and I didn't hold back. I had never told anyone the whole story, and to be honest, and maybe this is dumb of me, I had not put the statue and everything that had happened together. To me, it was all just a long line of horrible luck that our family had endured. Well, that deputy asked me if he could share my story with some friends of his who knew things about poltergeists and possession. I was so stunned. I never dreamed I would ever have anyone say something like that to me in a conversation about my life. I just told him yes, and he left. I sat down that night and for the first time in a long time had a good hard cry. How could I have missed that this might not have all been completely logical and normal? The next 4 nights in a row were a living hell. The animals or whatever was outside upped their behavior. They started actually breaking windows and playing with doorknobs on the front and back door. We weren't sure what to do, and the final night was when my dog ran through the door while I opened it to look out in the yard, and he was yanked up from the edge of the woods. I saw what did it. It was a small man or animal, and looked like some kind of small child with large eyes, and its teeth were sharp, and it took off with my dog into the trees. I shot my gun, and we then locked ourselves into my bedroom for the rest of the night. We could hear these things doing all kind of havoc outside in the yard, and then we could hear them in the house. We broke down again and called the police the next day. We wanted to leave, but wanted someone else with us when we left the house, even if it was daylight. The police officer that showed up took a look around, and when he came back up to the front porch, he was scared out of his mind. He wanted us to hurry up our packing and get out of the house. He had found my dog in the yard. My dog had been eaten halfway, and there were these little footprints in the mud all around the house. The footprints looked like those of a small child, but with 3 toes. It looked like maybe there were several of these animals, but that wasn't the only tracks that was out there. There was also these small hoof prints. Not front legs, but just the back legs of a small goat, like it was walking on its hind legs, walking all around the house. That was the thing that scared me the most of what he said. The statue my grandson carried around and called Tina was a little naked man with horns. And half of him, well, he was a goat from the waist down. We left that day and stayed in a hotel and didn't go back to the house. The deputy who asked if he could tell my story to his friends called me. He asked if he and his friends could go look at the house and come see and talk to us. We said yes, but told them we wanted them to grab some things at our house for us, and we gave them a list. That night they called us and said they had our things, and the most comforting part of all of it was they said they believed what we had told them. They had video and pictures of the footprints, and also they think that maybe soon everything would be all over. We decided to meet with them the next day at lunch and discuss everything and get our items from the house. I don't know what came over me that night, but I had the biggest sense of relief. I think it was just having someone say they believed us. Being out of the house for several nights and this group of people saying they had pictures and video of the things around our house. I just, all of a sudden, for some reason, felt like things might be okay. We had slept well the past few nights, even if it was in a hotel, and my grandson had been just so normal. I decided that before we met this deputy and his friends the next day, we should see if the kids could stay a day in school, and if my grandson might be let back for one day and see how it went. I also wanted to go see a realtor about putting our house and property up for sale. I just for once felt like maybe this could all go away and we could pick up from where we were. The next day we did all of that and got my grandchildren back in school and started the ball rolling on maybe selling my house. We then went to the diner to meet the deputy and his friends. I was having what felt like the first good day in a very long time. When we arrived at the diner, we met the group of people the deputy had brought to look into my house. There were 5 of them plus the deputy. They all looked like they were in their mid-30s except 2 of them, and all were tossing around various forms of camera equipment, looking like they were going to film a TV show. There were these 2 brothers named John and Isaac, a woman named Mary Ann, a younger man named Brent, and then an older man that looked almost Native American they just called Hawk, that we later found out was in fact Shawnee. They had all known the deputy when he had lived in Point Pleasant, West Virginia, before he moved to Kentucky to be with his girlfriend. They all seemed nice, but very excited and wanted to get right to talking to us about everything in the house. I never will forget where we sat that day. We pushed together a bunch of tables right next to a large window in the diner. We all ordered coffee, soft drinks, or sweet teas, and I remember, for whatever reason, we were all joking and laughing like we had known each other for a long time, even though my daughter and I had just met them in the parking lot for the first time a few minutes before. They told us about the day and night they spent in our house. I didn't know they had stayed the night, but they did something I just never thought to do with all of our terror. They got some pictures, video, and sound recording or whatever was messing around my house. They were so excited. The crazy thing is that we felt so isolated and so ostracized by other family and friends. We just kept to ourselves, so we had to involve the police. But they went and talked to people living on neighboring properties. Our house was secluded in the woods, so we just thought of it being us, but turns out several people were also having strange things happen at night too. Nothing as bad as us, but there were also other pictures, and the people who lived behind us were almost as scared as we were, but were even more scared to discuss it than us. I couldn't believe my sense of relief. I was just so happy we were not alone. We looked at some of their pictures and also watched a few videos. I was not as impressed with the videos as they were, with just seeing small things running around the edge of the light in the woods and seeing just eyes shining through windows. I am a country girl from Kentucky, and I know anyone but us looking at that would say that they could be anything. Owls, raccoons, a possum, a bunch of monkeys escaped from somebody's backyard zoo. It wasn't the video that made my skin crawl, but the sounds they caught the things making in the woods. These weird sounds that don't sound like anything from this part of the world. I had a hard time listening to those, but it seemed to bring some relief to my daughter to have that playing out loud in daylight, high volume around all these people. My daughter started crying right there, and I just remember her looking at all of them and saying, "So you promise you believe us?" It broke my heart to hear her say that, and that deputy assured us and assured her that he did believe us, and that's why he had brought all these people here. I asked what about all of it made him believe, and what made him want to come out and look at our house and think that we were important enough to spend time on. We appreciated it, but what exactly was in it for them? The deputy then told us about talking to my grandson the night he spent time in our house. My grandson told him all about this little devil statue, Tina, and he knew that something wasn't right and that something bad was either going to happen to my grandson or someone else before it was all through. He said at first he was scared my grandson was possessed by something. This made my daughter cry, and she started nodding her head. She watched scary movies and liked those types of things, and I guess I was just more practical. She said that she and her kids had started sleeping in their room with the door locked at night until my grandson started acting normal again the past few weeks. I never knew all that. I was so surprised. I think I was just in denial. The deputy said he had talked to my grandson that night and realized he didn't think it was possession after getting more information. He said he first asked my grandson to say the name of the statue several times slowly, and he pulled out his phone and played a voice recording of my grandson saying the name of the little stone statue. As he said it, I realized he wasn't saying Tina, but something a little more pronounced, like Tinia. The recording went on, and the deputy asked my grandson about the things Tinia did for him. He said that Tinia told him when things were fixing to happen to him or things that were fixing to happen to other people. He said Tinia told him about a big fire that would happen when someone fell asleep. My grandson said that when the fire did happen, that we wouldn't see Tinia anymore. The deputy asked where Tinia was now, and my grandson said that, well, Tinia was in the statue, but now him and some of his friends he brought with him are the ones outside scaring everyone. My grandson sounded a little sad then, and the deputy just changed the subject, and that was all he recorded. He said that this conversation was what made him call his friends from Point Pleasant, because he was worried something was wrong and they might can help. A lot more crying happened when they asked if my daughter and I would tell them everything in detail, and they wanted to record it. We said of course, and we started from the beginning. I started with the day in the cave, now that the deputy had pointed that part out to me as being the most important, and that was when it all started. We cried through discussing my grandson's behavior, my husband's death, my son's separation, and then my daughter's separation. They stayed quiet and only asked questions when they wanted to clarify things, and their questions even helped me connect a few things and learn a few things I never knew. I learned that my husband had told my daughter that he was having dreams before his stroke, of being in a dark room and feeling for his way out, and a voice telling him it was too late and there was no way of saving the children now. She also heard some of the things my grandson would say to the statue. She said it was always things that sounded like answers to questions the statue was asking the boy. Some of it sounded nasty and made her worried that my son or daughter-in-law was abusing the child. But also he would answer questions about his school and where his class was in the building and how close it was to the other bigger buildings in the area, which she thought was odd but not disturbing like the other things. To get the whole story out with them stopping to ask questions, I think it took almost 3 hours and was close to time for the kids to get out of school. We were tired but also happy to just have it all out in the open and someone paying us attention. When we were finally done, I remember the lunch rush was way over and the diner was quiet again. We had all eaten something by that point, and we were all just looking at our drinks, quiet, not knowing what to say next. The group was all shifting in their seats, and then that was when the man Hawk started talking. I realized then that the others in the group had done most of the talking the whole time we had been there. He reached in his pocket and pulled out the little devil man statue and put it on the table. I remember we just kind of sat back from it like it might bite us. Hawk said not to worry, that it was that moment he didn't think dangerous, that whatever was dangerous in the thing was gone, but that it would come back. He then asked us such an out-of-the-blue question, I just remember thinking he was not on the same page as the rest of us. Like maybe he had not been paying any attention to us the whole time we were in the diner. He asked if we had ever visited Point Pleasant, West Virginia, or had ever heard of it. We both looked at each other and just shook our heads at him. He then asked if we had ever heard of the Mothman. I think I actually said something along the lines of, why are you asking us about superheroes and movies? It was about that same time my daughter said, oh, I have heard of that but never saw that movie. It was obvious we were both ignorant, just to different degrees. Hawk launched into a story about his town, Point Pleasant, and how years ago, large man-like creature with wings and red glowing eyes started being seen in Point Pleasant. He said there was a lot more to the story that had to do with aliens and Indian curses and people experiencing all these weird things, but the thing he wanted us to focus on the most was what happened after all this strange stuff just stopped. Hawk said that a bridge collapsed, killing a lot of people, and when that happened, the Mothman sightings had also stopped. He said a lot of people believed that whether he was good or bad, he was there as kind of a warning, or maybe feeding off of the bad things that were going to happen in the town. He said that the deputy and this group of people had all had weird experiences in Point Pleasant, and that because of them, they had kind of become a group that goes out and looks into strange events. They want to try to stop a bad thing from happening by paying attention to the strange events that might happen before them. He said he thinks sometimes things or entities come before disasters to do good or bad, maybe warn or feed off of the event, or maybe to cause them. But either way, if you are paying attention, you can see where horrible things might happen before they happen. He said that his group had been successful once in keeping some people safe. He was hoping to do it here, but was scared they were too late. I asked them what all that had to do with us, and he pointed at the little statue on the table. He said that the statue is a statue of a Greek figure named Pan. Pan was kind of a little half-goat man who was seen as a symbol of sex, food, and drink, or just pleasure in general. Some stories of Pan show him as being slightly mischievous and liking to cause trouble. He said he doesn't know why, but it is said that a small group of people that lived in the southeast were kind of Pan worshippers, or at least gave him some honor, but that those were just rumors as far as he had known. The group had died out or moved on to other states, but no one had heard much out of them since before the late 1920s. He said he wasn't sure why a statue of Pan was chosen, but he does believe that this statue did bring something into our world, and that this thing is here with us because something bad is going to happen. I asked him why, and what made him think that of all the places in the world, it was here for us in this town. He said that all boiled down to what the deputy recorded my grandson calling his little Pan idol. I asked what he meant, and I remember it so vividly because it made my heart just race and my whole body break out into a sweat. He said that the name wasn't Tina like we could plainly hear once my grandson said the name slowly, but he was saying Tinia. He said Tinia was Latin for both worm, or, as it is used in most ways, moth. The ease that I had felt was gone, and I just needed to run to my grandchildren. I felt a sudden sense of dread, and I can't explain it, but we told them I would pick up my grandchildren and head to the hotel. We would get our things and head as far away from all of this as we could. The man Hawk suggested we get the kids and our things, and we would meet him on the interstate, and we could stay in a rental property of his in West Virginia. I just said fine and ran to the car. I don't remember the car ride as vividly as I remember what happened once we were on Main Street. It was a loud sound, not like a boom, but more of a whack, like a huge axe on a huge tree. There was no feeling behind it, but almost immediately, miles away from us, you saw a massive ball of smoke just rise up. My daughter screamed like I have never heard her scream before, and it took me a few seconds to see what she was seeing. The smoke was right where the school might be. I told her to stop. Stop crying, because that could be anywhere. But I know as much as she did, something had just happened at that school. The next 2 weeks I honestly don't remember a lot of, because I was prescribed so many medications to calm me down, I just stayed in a constant fog. It wasn't the school that exploded, but the chemical plant next to it. I remember when the school was built next to the plant when I was in high school. It was so long ago and seemed so safe since it was just the way it had always been. The chemical plant was a huge draw to our town, and back then having the kids near where their dads worked or even their moms just seemed right. I know a few years after my son was born, there was some talk of building it somewhere away from the plant, but cost was just too much. 102 children died in that explosion and over 55 adults, and the internet will tell you it is one of the worst disasters caused by a factory explosion in the U.S. They think that a man fell asleep on his job after what his family described as a night of having to stay up because some animals had kept him awake. He has said he had been having a problem with some really smart raccoons or something the past few weeks. I guess it's just extra detail you probably don't need to figure out he lives only a short distance down the road from my house. 2 of my grandchildren survived that explosion. It was a miracle, but that day their dad had gotten a call from a strange man whom my son-in-law thinks might have had a woman's name, like Ingrid. The man said that both of the kids were sick and needed to go home. He told them that his mother was supposed to take care of them, but the man insisted that they were dangerously sick. The kids had been out of school with doctor's notes for so long, my daughter had thankfully not told the school that my son-in-law couldn't pick the kids up and that they were separated. He got the kids and left with them to his home right over the county line. My grandson was killed in the explosion. He was one of the 102 children that now have a large memorial being built in the middle of town. I know you have probably heard about all of this on the news. I made the group of people that came to visit us in Kentucky to never reveal anything they know about what happened. My neighbors and I met, and we decided that whatever was out there in those woods and kept that man up was not for us to tell anyone about. And the sheriff also said none of his deputies who responded to our calls the nights we called them were going to say a word about anything strange in our house. The man's family who fell asleep that day is dealing with enough grief. It was the man Hawk who told me about you. He said he met you once while visiting a national park in your area, and you helped him with something that was bothering him, and that you would know what to do with this damn little statue. 2 weeks ago or thereabout, we started packing up my house to move when I heard something fall out of a box. On the floor was the Pan statue. I immediately picked it up, and Hawk and the other people of the group all called me to swear they had left the statue on the table of the diner that day. Not long after we left, the explosion happened, and they all picked up their stuff and left to see what was going on, and all swore they never picked it up. Hawk then gave me your address and told me to tell you this whole story, and he said that you would know what to do. He said you know his number and you can call him if you want, but he also said that with things like this, it is better that things are discussed in writing, in person. He said electronic forms of communication can be dangerous. I don't know what all that means, but what I do know is that this thing needs to be sent away from me. And I want to move on with my life, whatever shambles it may be in. Please, please, can you keep this thing and never let it do any harm to anyone again? My goodness. Well, that is some story. To lose a child is bad, but to lose a grandchild and to something so... I think she handled that way better than I ever could have. All right? Grab
Hello?
that box.
Mama?
And don't touch that
Dakota?
little thing any more than
You doing your
need to,
deliveries a
and
little
follow me.
early this morning, aren't you?
I have a place for things.
Yes, ma'am.
And
I
you
hope
need
that's
to know
all
how
right.
to handle them.
I'm trying to
All
get
right,
off of
see
work
that
a little
picture?
early today.
Looks like a normal
Oh?
place to store food, doesn't
Well,
it?
how about that?
All right.
Getting
Now,
off early have anything
Look
to
here
do
what
with
I
that
did.
little Jones girl?
How'd you know
The
that?
look on your face.
I'm
It's just
old
another
boy,
kind of
not
pantry
blind.
child. And it's just
Yes, ma'am.
hidden behind my
I
regular
just
one.
haven't told anyone
Sit the
yet
box
that we are
down
going
and
on a
watch me.
date.
I'm going to take this piece of cloth
Oh,
and pick
I've
up
seen
statue.
you two glancing at each
There.
other.
See?
Tell you
As a
what,
little contact with
if
the
your
skin,
next few
as
dates
these
go
things
well,
can get, the
you
better.
tell me which day you want to do
And then
it,
I'm going to
and
put
I'll
it
pack
here
you
in
to
this
a
wooden
picnic.
box.
And you can take her out near the lake.
What we do
Would
next
you like
can
that?
wait until my friend
Yes,
Hawk
ma'am.
shows up.
I really would.
Well,
What?
good.
Yes.
Like I said,
Same
just
Hawk and her
let me know
letters on
when.
his way here now. I
Just
know him.
promise me
And
something.
he and I will figure out the best way to store
I don't want
this
you
thing
two
here
hanging
until
out
we
down
figure
near
out
the
another
lake at
safe
night.
place for it.
Not
It may
alone
stay
with just
here,
the two
or
of
it
you.
may need to be destroyed.
I know that
Depends
is
on
where
what
all
Hawk
the
and
young
a few
couples
others I
like to
know who
go, and
might
I
come
just
to
think
look at it,
maybe
think.
keeping the romance around the lake
I
in the
told you
daytime
I would
is
show you
safest.
things you have never seen before, and all the things
Okay,
in these
Mama.
shelves
Good.
in this pantry here
That
are
lake
just
can
as
be
full
dangerous
of
for
stories as
couples
the
at
things in the
night.
front of my shop.
Can?
Except
Oh,
their stories are
I'm just
connected
an old
to things
woman
that
being
need to be
worried,
kept
but
away from people.
Humor
Or
me
sent
if you
back to
don't
wherever
mind.
they came from to begin
Sure
with.
thing, Mama.
Or just plain
Now, what
destroyed
do you
as
have
soon as
for
the
me?
time is right for us to do it.
Just this one
No,
package
child.
today.
It is late.
Sign for
And
it,
that poor
right?
woman's letter
here.
is still on me.
I wasn't expecting a package
Another night
today,
I will
so
tell
this
you
is a
about some of
surprise.
these things, and you have your first day
Alrighty.
at your new
I'll see
job
you
on
later
Blooming
now,
Falls
Mama.
Police Department.
Okay, hon.
So let's stop here.
You have fun tonight.
You think on
And
everything
don't get up
you've
in any
heard,
trouble.
though, and let's discuss it later.
No, ma'am, I won't. Promise.
This is the end of my last hour here tonight, and I want
Oh, to be 20
thank
again.
all of you night owls listening
what could
to
be in
me
this
go
box?
back to my college days, one song at a time. I am also
Good
thinking
evening,
over
Blooming
this
Falls.
Greek life thing, and
I
thinking
know
that
everyone
it
is
seems
excited
like a lot
and a
of
little
work.
tired after
But
a
I
week
was
of getting
probably
ready for
too
the
lazy
upcoming
of a
college
college
days.
kid to pledge anyways.
This weekend has always
Oh,
been
well.
great fun, and
My
not
college
every
life
town
is
can boast
very
that they are
much
the
ancient
chosen place of
history at
over
this point.
3,000 college students from
Or,
all
as my
over
Greek
the
mythology
state
professor
to
would
have
say,
a really great
my
party.
college years are as
The
dead as
tradition of
pan.
Greek Day started so far back,
He
no
thought
one
he
really
was
knows the
funny
history,
saying
but
things like that,
for
even
3 days
though
in February,
no
a
one
large
else would
number
get
of
the joke,
fraternities and
except for nerds like
sororities
me.
descend upon this town
Pan
to
was the only
experience
Greek
a
god
few
that ever
nights out in the
actually
rough.
died. Yep.
Or as rough as they
I
might
couldn't
want to
pledge
get
to a
these days
sorority,
by
but I
spending
could
a few
get a
winter
joke
nights camping by the
referencing
lake.
2,000-year-old Greek mythology.
I am expected to remind
And
everyone
now
that
I have a job
usual
where I get to
precautions
tell the
are
joke
being
to all of
taken,
you
and there
listening
will
to
be
me
more
on late
visible
night
police
radio.
presence over the weekend.
I love my life.
Although we all look forward to this weekend, we still want everyone to stay safe.
This
Sheriff
was the
Birdie
Mama
wants to
Night Owl
remind
Oddities and
everyone there is a
Curiosities Shop
fine in
podcast.
jail time to anyone
Music
caught
from the
selling
show can be
alcohol
found at
to an
farpointband.com.
underage individual.
The show was produced
Having
by
said
Kevin
that, I know
Jarvis
we all just
and
want
narrated by
a
Summer
very
Jarvis.
safe and fun
If you have a
weekend.
story that you think
Up
belongs
next,
on Mama Night Owl,
I have some
or
very
music
fitting
you
music
want featured
from
on the show,
Secret
you can
Societies,
send an
the
email
Blonde
to
Twins, and
mamanightowlpodcast@gmail.com. If you like the show, the best way you can support it is to give us a 5-star rating. We hope to meet you again in Blooming Falls.